1972 Fate of the Union. The first segment here, for those of you listening along on the podcast, is we're going to go over a video here from an outlet, a YouTube channel called The Cut. Now, I've yet to hear about this particular outlet or platform or what have you before I started hearing about this video that made the rounds. I know that Steven Crowder did a video on it. I personally really first heard of it through watching Revenge of the Sis on YouTube, which I recommend everybody go watch and subscribe and go over to their Patreon. That's really how I came to really be familiar with this video. The video is titled, "So What Exactly Are White People Superior At? Keep It 100, Black in America, The Cut." And the title is not, as you would imagine, complimentary. It's supposed to be what negative, malicious, conspiratorial aspects or characteristics are white people better at than others. That kind of explains, supposedly, the theory and narrative of the white supremacist system and the systemic racism and the what have you. An interesting part about this video, first off, is, as those of you who can obviously see on the YouTube version of this segment, is that it is currently standing at a resounding 10,000 upvotes and 198,000 downvotes. It's getting absolutely obliterated. The Cut has a very large following. It has 10.2 million subscribers, and like I said, although I'm not really familiar with it, I did do a kind of a cursory review of their library on YouTube, and this seems to be the general tone and tenor of the kind of things that they're publishing. Another interesting thing is that although this video is a little over a month old at this point, published on November 15th, 2020, when I was watching Revenge of the Sis this past week, the comments were disabled, and it at least appears from my familiarity with this video is that they were perhaps reactivated, which if you go take a look through the comments, that was clearly a mistake, because it's getting absolutely annihilated in virtually every one of the 10,500 comments currently logged on this video. So without further ado, let's get into the video.
What exactly are white people superior at?
Oh, well, according to television, everything. A white man could fly. Even a white woman, she could be 4'1". She knew karate. She could take down 15 people.
And the first slideshow here says we asked 100 black folks, FOLX, very inclusive, in America to tell us what white people are superior at. And the introductory comment there is relevant just because I'm not sure what television show that woman is watching. There really aren't any television shows around, at least in the kind of primetime lineup of the main channels, CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox, that kind of mainstays of primetime television viewing, that has anything that's really even complimentary to the white characters on the show. Nevertheless, showing some kind of air of superiority or invincibility to them. I became familiar with a show, I think it was on last year, called The Line, and it was based off of a police shooting in contested circumstances, and every single part of the political backdrop, it's set in Chicago, so you can use your imagination there, but the backdrop of the political setting, of the shooting itself, of the legal proceedings, is all 100% slanted, and I think that's representative of really any show, again, on primetime television. So that narrative is very, very long gone. And we're going to skip ahead here, but in between, there's a lot of talk of the kind of classic of white people don't know how to spice their food. They think mayonnaise is spicy, and there are comedians who do some funny jokes about that, and it's all based on kind of like the white Karen doesn't really know how to make any tasty food. But all of this is not said. I encourage everyone to go watch the video, but even the initial review of its feedback so far shows you that none of these are jokes. These are really mean-spirited comments based on race. At the very least, it's mean-spirited in kind of the food and the way they dress and the way they talk, and it gets a lot worse than that, as we'll see. There's a lot of claims that venture into the ridiculous on the one hand, and really the outright racist and conspiratorial on the other.
Extreme water sports,
Corn mazes.
White people are great at having fun. That's a function of white supremacy because they just don't have as many stresses as we do.
White people.
And there you heard it. It's a ridiculous statement that white people are great at having fun. This, of course, is a function of white supremacy. And the follow-up comment there by that gentleman is that the black people can't have fun and enjoy themselves in this way, you see, because there is racism, the systemic systems of structural institutions lurking around every corner, and that, of course, haunts their very being. This is a completely cancerous narrative and way of thinking that has really permeated the inner cities and the younger demographics of the inner cities, which I think is particularly harmful. A young black person growing up in the inner cities, they hear that they're being hunted for sport. There are these agents of the state lurking around every block that's just waiting to execute them. Every single vehicle or institution in America that one would come into contact is purposely against you because of a characteristic that you simply cannot change. It's setting up a wide array of individuals for absolute failure. And it's no wonder that a lot of people have this mindset coming up when it's being jammed in their heads by teachers and parents and community leaders and politicians. And as ridiculous as it may be, for a young kid, you have to understand, for a young, highly susceptible mind in terms of influence, when you see that kind of idea coming from every supposed authority figure in your community or in your personal life, you can see how that really gains a lot of traction, unfortunately, and will set you up for absolute failure. And really quite a disappointing upbringing and a disappointing outlook on life as you head into young adulthood, which it really is a shame. It is quite disappointing, the effects that this can have on the younger generation of Black Americans.
Arrested. I was driving down the street down the highway with a friend of mine who was white, and he's like, I'm just going to pull over and pee. And I'm in the passenger seat. And I was like, please don't. Because a black man thinks differently. If I pull over to the side of the road and pee, a cop is going to be right behind me to punish me.
And there you hear again the kind of traffic infraction. That's a black individual got killed because of a traffic infraction. You hear that when you hear of cases where such and such got killed because they had a broken taillight, because they didn't signal, because they were speeding. The Rayshard Brooks case is an especially good case to apply that to because it's recent. All the video is clear, all the evidence is on video. Nevertheless, you heard people like Trevor Noah and the Young Turks say that he was killed because he got stopped for DUI. There's a very concerted effort to ignore all the facts in between and attribute the fatal use of force to the originating reason for the interaction with police. And that's a good case study, Rayshard Brooks, because we know the DUI was just the reason for the very first interaction between he and the police officers. Him being intoxicated but also resisting arrest, swinging punches on both cops, stealing their tasers and shooting at them, and then running away with the taser was the reason he got shot. They weren't carrying out an arrest on a black man for drunk driving, and that's just the way it goes. There were clearly superseding events that happened in between that provides a very clear explanation for what happened. This next part is an astonishing comment, and we will most certainly get into it.
And everybody else, really.
They ballsy. They rose up all over the world, and they walk into everybody's house and says, "Oh, this is nice. I'm gonna take your shit," and they have no qualms about it. They can take anything, baby.
What exactly are white people superior?
They're real good at violence.
Violence. If you go back and watch the episode from last week of Revenge of the Sis, I think this almost broke Mersh. I hope he's okay, because, and I could only imagine, white people are real good at violence. Let me try to address this in the most community guidelines friendly way, although I'm sure there won't be a lot of attention to this. Of course, the guys like Revenge of the Sis and certainly Steven Crowder have different considerations because they're obviously on YouTube's radar. I am not, so maybe that's a benefit. So we'll get into it. They're better at violence. We know this to be absolutely ridiculous. The last I checked, over 50%, about 54.5% of murders every year are committed by a black individual, despite being 13% of the population. And as we spoke about on some of the earlier episodes of the podcast when we were first starting out, it's not really 13%, because you have to essentially cut out the entire female population of the black community because they're statistically irrelevant as far as the murder stats go for the black community and the offenders as far as murder goes. So that gets you down to roughly 6.5%, 7% for black men. And then, of course, you have to cut it down again because it's not black children. Of course, there are young black men being convicted of murder, but there's certainly below 16 don't really show up in the statistics, and over 50 don't really show up in the statistics. It's a particular issue, an offense committed by not just the black community. It's really black men, more specifically, and even more specifically than that, black men roughly from 16 to 50. So whatever percentage you can whittle that down to of the U.S. population, that's really the crux of the high offense rate. So that really gets you down to what, about 3% maybe is responsible for very clearly over 50% of the murder. And it's a similar story, although maybe not the same numbers, but a similar story when it comes to rape and sexual assault, simple assault, aggravated assault, manslaughter, really any violent crime. The same general story goes, is that the very outsized representation in those statistics for offenders of those violent crimes would be, again, being specific here, black men, but black men between 16 and 50. And perhaps better saved for another time, we can go into why that is. Why are we seeing repeat offenders insofar as the same relatively specific demographics finding themselves being convicted of these laws? Why is it so identifiable of a trend in this one particular demographic? We can get into that, but that, of course, assumes the idea that it's true, which it is. It absolutely is true that really any violent crime, if you take the annual statistics, and this has been the case certainly as far as I've been studying the law, which dates back to when I started law school in around 2013, I suppose it was. So it's been the case for all the years in the interim, and certainly will be before that, the general outline of violent crime in America. So to say that it's really a preposterous statement, not backed up by any evidence whatsoever. And of course, this is not to mention that the clear disparity between black on white violent crime as opposed to white on black violent crime, not only is the total, or certainly intra-race, absolutely that, more represented in the black community as far as violent crime offenders. If you look at the number of offenses from one race to the other, there's well over 10 times the amount of crime. I think it was about 20 or so, 20 times the amount of violent crimes committed by blacks onto white victims rather than the other way around. So even if it looks through the lens of what threat is race A posing to race B vis-a-vis the violence or violent crimes or violent acts they're perpetuating on the other race, it's again not even close. It's not even close. So that was really the ultimate point that I wanted to see, that last comment there as far as the violence part. And again, this is really just a very deep-seated idea, and videos like this do not help. If the cut thinks that they're, well, they certainly think they're being woke, I suppose, but if they think they're helping black people, and especially young black people, they most certainly are not. That's just incontrovertibly true. Closely held beliefs like this, especially for young people, can be very harmful and will continue to be going forward. The sad truth about this is that the effects of narratives like this in the black community are not a surprise. The negative outcomes and the continual disadvantages that these communities see are tied to these kinds of attitudes, are tied to these widespread lies. So as far as the facts like this, the effects of videos like this, rather, it's on the one hand yet to be seen, because of course the future has not happened yet, but it's highly predictable and really should not come as a surprise. It's going to lead to further forgiveness or really ignorance of crime in the inner cities, which has, they like to say systemic, the word systemic, that has systemic effects. Businesses don't want to open up in dangerous neighborhoods because they think they're going to get strong arm robbery on any given day. I'm not going to put out my business capital to open up some kind of storefront in a dangerous area. It's just not a good investment. It hurts entrepreneurship, it hurts jobs, it hurts just certainly the school systems, which violence among young black Americans seeps into urban schools for sure. The violent crime and just general air of violence and living in a state of fear in the inner cities has such a permeating effect that goes beyond just the actual victims of those crimes. So we'll keep an eye on videos like this in the future because I really do take it from a perspective that um, I would ideally like to rid these kinds of ideas from young Black Americans because it's not setting them up for success, and it's really done as a money ploy, whether successful or not. I think that this kind of race baiting industry is unfortunately a very, very lucrative industry. Um, so I think that the producers of videos like this know they're getting clicks, know they're getting ad revenue, and that might be, whether that's a well-founded belief or not, I think that's some of the originating intention behind videos like this. Certainly it's to divide. Certainly a lot of these views are also held by those who come up with these ideas for videos and produce them and publish them, but I think money has a lot to do with it as well, unfortunately, because it is making money off of lying to an entire race of people that you so claim to want to protect. But we will continue to look at issues like this going forward, and we'll see you for the rest of the episode over on iTunes and Spotify for Fate of the Union.